Hello, it's nobody's favorite time of the week again. It's Ask a Rabbi Wednesday. This is a question that I received many years ago on JewishAnswers.org. And there was actually two different answers, so we have the original and the follow-up. So the first question we received is, what does the Talmud tell us about unicorns? Alright. So it says, thank you for your excellent question. This is my answer. There are several references in the Talmud and other Torah literature that may be interpreted as unicorns. First of all, the Talmud in Zvachim, it's in Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, it's 113b, mentions an animal called Orzila. That's an Aramaic word, which is a giant animal. Some consider that this could be the Re'em that's mentioned a few places in the Bible, which is generally understood to be a giant horned mammal. We find this in Job 39, 9-2, Psalm 22, verse 21, Psalm 29, verse 6, Numbers 23, verse 22, Numbers 24, verse 8. We find in Deuteronomy 33, 17, and several other places in the Bible, which some translators have translated as unicorn, some translate as wild ox, and so forth. Now the Talmud says, the Medrash says that this was an animal that was too large to fit on Noah's Ark, but to survive the flood by grasping onto the ark with its horn, it apparently had one huge horn, and such an animal is described as a kosher animal and a wild animal. So it would be a bovoid animal, meaning it would be cloven hoofs and chews its cud, and with a single horn. We have the Gemara in Chulin, Samech Amud Aleph, that's Chulin 60a in the Talmud. It says that Adam sacrificed a one-horned mammal as a sacrifice, and we could assume that if it was a sacrifice, it was a domesticated kosher animal. And excuse me, on the previous Amud, Chulin Nun Tes Amud Beis, Chulin 59, there's a mammal called a keres, which is a one-horned mammal that's kosher to eat. So in general, we understand, the Jewish references to the unicorn would not be a horse with a single horn, as a horse is an animal with an uncloven hoof, but rather would be an animal with a cloven hoof, such as an antelope, a goat, a cow. And the fact of the matter is that occasionally it happens either as a mutation or is sometimes made in that way, that these animals do occasionally develop a single horn out of the center of their head. I've seen a cow like that. It was quite interesting because it looked like a regular cow, but instead of the horns being on the side and not being that big, it was a rather large horn that came out from the middle of the head. I saw that once at a fair. That's how it naturally grew. Sometimes goats, sometimes their horns are clubbed at a certain point in their youth to grow like that. And so perhaps there was a type of animal that did indeed grow like that. Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Ches Amud Beis, it's Sabbath 22b, talks about what we read in the Bible, the Tachash, which is in Exodus 26:14 and many other places. That is an animal that was renowned for its skins to make the curtains for the tabernacle. Sometimes it's translated as seal's skin. However, it is described as a colorful unicorn that only appeared at that location in the desert for Moses to use in the tabernacle. Afterwards became extinct. Also, it's assumed, since it was used in the tabernacle, to be a kosher animal. However, some explain that the extinction doesn't mean that it went extinct from the whole world, but rather it went extinct from that location. And one rabbi who I know who interprets that to be a giraffe, and that the giraffe has a bump in the middle of the head, and that's what he understands the horn in the middle of the head, and that the two knobs on the sides he understands differently. Others say it's not necessarily a kosher animal, and that it could actually be a narwhal, which of course narwhals don't live anywhere near there, as far as we know, didn't 3,000 years ago either, but it's possible. In Kabbalistic literature, we have in the Kabbalah unicorn-like animals and other fantastic animals living under the earth. Some would interpret that to be a hollow earth theory, which you find a lot of things on the YouTube talking about this. And among the fantastic mythological creatures that are said to live under the earth are unicorns. The Zohar in Parshas Bereishis talks about this, the Sod Sheva Haratzos, the secret of the seven lands. Some understand it to be the seven continents, but others understand it to be that the earth has seven hidden lands. The Sefer Chesed Lavram discusses this more in depth. Now, on Friday, April 11th, 2014, Mr. Ted Luxembourg from Pomona, New York, he identifies a Reformed Jew, made a follow-up to this, and it was rather arrogant and sarcastic. So the way he answered that, he said, so dinosaurs don't exist, despite an abundance of evidence, but unicorns do exist despite zero evidence. Where does the Talmud stand on fairies and Bigfoot? So my response to that was still respectful, despite his arrogance and his sarcasm. He said, "Dear Ted, thank you for your response. Thank you for your question." And my original response specifically wrote that they may be interpreted as unicorns. Doesn't mean that it's literally so. In general, Medrash, Agada, in Kabbalistic literature, is open to interpretation. Some take them literally, others take them figuratively. Some are taken as literal and some are taken as figurative. It's also positive to be simultaneously literal and figurative, meaning that God created such things to teach us a lesson. But in general, the main point is the lesson, not the literal, scientific, or historical lesson, but rather the ethical lesson that we learn from this. This not only as far as the Talmud and the Medrash and so forth, Agadata and Kabbalah, even the Bible itself. The Talmud has a whole discussion as to the historical nature of the book of Job. Some of the rabbis placed it in various historical periods, while there was one opinion that said that Job never existed and the book was only written as a parable to teach the lessons within. And it seems that Maimonides took that approach, although we can find evidence elsewhere that Maimonides had different approaches. So we could say in a similar sense that teachings concerning unicorns or other creatures similar to unicorns may be figurative. I mentioned before, which I didn't say in the original response, I remember one contemporary young rabbi who suggested that Tachash was a giraffe, because giraffes have a bump in the middle of their head. Others say that it wasn't a kosher animal but a narwhal, because the tusks of the narwhal formed into a shape similar to what some imagine the unicorn's horn would be like. Others not have the horn narrative at all, in reference to Tachash, would have suggested other animals as well. Now, he also mentioned dinosaurs. Now, I never wrote that dinosaurs never existed, or that they did not exist. I'm open to the idea that they even exist to this day, personally, although I'm sure this person would find that this Ted figure would probably scoff at that. I found two traditional views concerning dinosaurs, both of which say they did exist. I've heard some people in the Jewish community, Orthodox Jewish community, claim that dinosaurs never existed, but I've never found any traditional source to back such claims. And in general, most, although many people might suggest or ignore their existence, most likely they did. I found things to say they exist, including what I mentioned before. This creature mentioned in the Gemara, the Orzilah, which is mentioned Zvachim. Some people have, or the Re'aim, have been called referred to as dinosaurs. I remember I taught in the Satmar Cheder in Kiryas Yol, in 4th grade English. I taught, And the subject of dinosaurs came up, and one of the boys, he said, "Oh, of course dinosaurs exist. The Medrash says that David HaMelech rode on a dinosaur." I said, "Well, what do we call it?" They said, "Well, in Yiddish they call it a Wiesenthal, which is a big mammal." And I asked, was it a mammal or a reptile? They said, probably a mammal. But that's what the bones that they found out was what he understood it to be. Again, that's a Medrash. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the truth of that. So, the most traditionalist source to answer concerning the existence of dinosaurs is similar to the standard Christian creationist view. That God created dinosaurs either on the 5th or 6th day of creation. Most Christians like to say that the dinosaurs, I'm saying not most Christians, but most Christian creationists like to place the dinosaurs on the 6th day. I personally would say that they most likely were created on the 5th day, because the Torah tells us that on the 5th day God created Taninim Gedolim. The word Tanin generally means some kind of reptilian creature, whether sometimes it's a snake, sometimes a crocodile, in the Bible. So these creations of the giant reptiles fits well into the 5th day of creation. Also, it's interesting that the birds were created on the 5th day of creation, and scientists say that the birds are a type of dinosaur. You could have a less traditionalist source suggest that the 6 days create 6 major eras of geological time, and if you look at the eras of geological time, you start with the Azoic era and the Archaeozoic and Proterozoic, Archaeozoic, Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. So you have 6 major eras of time that in geological time that scientists look at, and they would say, so therefore you see that on the 5th day of creation, the 5th major era is the Mesozoic era, in which you have the creation of the giant reptiles and the birds, and the Cenozoic era is the 6th era, would be the 6th day of creation. There are many problems with that hypothesis, namely the mammals are said to have existed during the Mesozoic era, and that during the Paleozoic era you already had all kinds of animals, so it doesn't really fit perfectly, but there's some people who could suggest that. Now, if we go back to the traditionalist view, the more creationist type view, we would say that the dinosaurs existed before the flood, and most of them died during the flood or shortly thereafter, but some into the ark, maybe the smaller varieties or baby dinosaurs, or maybe the Rabbi we spoke about could have been a dinosaur. Like I remember my students, and we have different animals in the Bible, that the Rabbi, the Leviathan, the Behemoth, the Leviathan, the Behemoth, these animals. And some people suggest that dinosaurs could continue to exist today in remote areas. In cryptozoology, there's mentions of sightings of dinosaurs in remote areas of the Congo, the Kalimabembe, and other types. So this view would say that dinosaurs did indeed exist, but it was in recent history and not millions of years ago. It would suggest maybe the heat of the waters of the flood caused the fossilization more rapidly than expected, in which there is various evidence of such things. There have been discovery of fossilized foot in a cowboy boot, which clearly such a thing became fossilized in less than 200 years. If you do tests on it, also to be million years, but obviously that it's a cowboy boot. We know it's less than 200 years old. And there are also claims, like in Texas, of human footprints together on the same strata with dinosaur footprints and similar things like this. Now there's another approach. The plain Peggy, can you open for Bobby? I'm busy. The plain creationist view is not necessarily hello. Oh, who knocked over these cookies? So the creationist view is not the only view. We have also there's the Kabbalistic view, which seems to fit a little bit more in science, although not 100%. but it would fit much better into the scientific approach. And there's a Sefer Tiferes Yisrael, which or Yisrael Lipschitz, he lived from 1782 to 1860. He has in his Parish Mishnayos in Tiferes Yisrael, Drush Or HaChaim, the Sermon on the Light of Light, which is printed after his comments on Masechtas Sanhedrin. And he openly mentions dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. He begins by stating the Medrash teaches that God created worlds and destroyed them before our current creation. That's what the Kabbalists talk about, the Soda Shmitos, the mystery of the sabbaticals. So some understand the Soda Shmitos to be spiritual worlds or other dimensions, but others say that they existed on our plane of existence, so that could mean that there were massive extinction events throughout geological history long before, millions of years before our current creation event took place, and that the 6 days of creation happened indeed 5,000 years, 5,700 years ago, but before that the world existed in another way before this creation for millions of years and was created and destroyed and so forth. And he mentions specifically the discoveries of the mammoths in Siberia, the fossils of sea creatures on high mountains, and large creatures which he mentions by name, the iguanodon and the megalosaurus, which were the first two dinosaur species named. He wrote this sermon before Sir Richard Owen coined that term dinosauria. And he says that those actually prove the veracity of our own Kabbalistic traditions. It teaches that millions of years ago large creatures existed long before the creation of man. And therefore Rabbi Lipschitz thought the discovery of fossilized dinosaur bones not only do not pose any threat to our faith, but rather provide existence that our faith is true. Now next he asked about Bigfoot. Now there are references in the Talmud, something similar to Bigfoot or missing link types of creatures. Mishnah Kalaim Perek Ches Mishnah Hey Kalayim 8:5 talks about Adnei Asodeh, masters of the field. Some point out that in Job 5:23 it says Avnei Asodeh, the rocks of the field, and the Talmud there questions whether this animal, which has some aspects similar to humans and some similar to apes, as to whether it's classified as a human being or an animal. And Rabbi Lipschitz also suggests that Adnei Asodeh is a known ape species like an orangutan or a gorilla. Some say it's an unknown species or an extinct species. And there are also fanciful legends about this Adnei Asodeh that it has an umbilical cord attached to the ground, things like that. So that could also be a Bigfoot creature. Fairies, I know some Kabbalists who have discussed that as well. I'm not going to get into that right now. So we see here that even in Orthodox circles, many if not most rabbis understand texts that seem fantastic either in a rational way that could fit into science, or a figurative way to teach a lesson or an ethical lesson, but not necessarily to teach science or history. So thank you for watching. You could please, if you have any other further questions, please put them in the comments below. You can feel free to comment, subscribe, and share and like. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. In addition to that, and so my point is that there are many different views, and really what I would say is both views are probably totally kosher, meaning if you want to take a literal view, that's fine. If you want to take a figurative view, that's fine. Either way is fine. Neither one is heretical, so we can fit in either way. I thank you very much, and God bless again.